Cool. Well, thank you guys for sticking around. I'm Nick Leonard. I'm the product designer for the Plan project management team. I'll talk a little bit about plan collections and specifically lists and boards. There's other collections like roadmaps that are out there and certainly would be considered, but not so much the focus today. Um, so, everyone here is, I'm sure, used lists and boards and probably are aware of some of these, but just to kind of call out some of what you can do today, you can filter your list, you can filter your boards. But as you've maybe seen, the filters aren't one-to-one between the two. They work generally the same, but you don't necessarily have the same options between the two. With like a list, you can save, quote unquote, save your filters just by copying the URL string or bookmarking that. Boards, you can save a board, but that tends to create a huge list of shared boards between everybody. The data that is shown per item can be quite extensive if you're using milestones, iterations, due dates, assignees, things like that. And again, it's not exactly one-to-one between the list and the board views. There's not really a lot of controls to kind of change how these are shown. You basically can turn the labels off on the boards, and you can sort things. But that's kind of about it today. And yeah, here's the picture. I think you've seen these. You kind of know what I'm talking about here. So what we found is, there's a number of challenges with these. And as we talk to customers and users of these, there's a couple of things that have tended to bubble up to the top, especially in some of the recent discussions that I've been part of. So some of it's around like data and filtering and basically using these views as a tool, not just a tool to navigate somewhere else, but an actual tool to understand what is happening in my teams. And so we hear things like, I don't want to see what you guys think I should see. I want to see what I want to see, meaning I really care about this field, that field. That's what tells me the context of what's happening. I want to be able to look and see, things like status, things like where things are moving. Some of this definitely ties into the labels issue that I know was mentioned earlier, that it's a little bit hard to do some of that when a lot of that data is in labels today. But basically just, I want to be able to kind of slice and dice things as I need. A lot of customers are doing this in external tools like Excel, which is kind of tedious. And we've had customers directly ask for, like, do you have something like saved views, or the boards are kind of cool, but how can I do a bit more with this? The other is ease of editing, and that's again like using these collections as a tool unto themselves, not just a navigational tool, but actually a way to manage the work. So we have bulk editing today, which a lot of customers talk about using, and we get a lot of feature requests in project management about extending the functionality of bulk editing. We also get basically the cool bulk editing is great when I need to change 20 things, but I also want it to be faster to edit one thing. And there's expectations of being able to basically just sort of quickly change something. We saw this even when we were testing tasks in the child items, which a lot of people were expecting to basically just be able to click the status and change it, or click the name and change it. That is how other tools tend to work. And I think, while that finding was in the kind of child items or now tasks widget, I think the same expectations are likely to exist in other collections as well. And then lastly, the conglomeration of data, especially for larger organizations that have information in a lot of different teams, meaning groups, meaning projects. Some of our users, especially in the project management space, want to take kind of a top-down look and look across these. And you can kind of do that today, right? You can go into a group, you can look at the issues, but we don't have a lot of tools to really make that reporting more easy. You can't really like filter down by a group or a project and like slice and dice that data. Again, I had a customer ask, well, could you just add like an export from groups so I can more easily bring it into Excel? Because right now I go into every project and I export it and then I merge it in Excel. We shouldn't be making them do that. We should just be giving them some tools that they can do a bit of that reporting within the product itself, make it easier to find, make it easier to use. So coming out of this, like some of what we're starting to think about is just different ways to address these. these sort of challenges. So we've made some relatively small recent updates. These are responding to customer feedback around primarily the first two around manual prioritization. So I don't know if this is something you guys necessarily would use, but if you go into like the issues list, you can set it to manual sort mode, which makes it work similar to a board. And then in the boards, you can obviously move things up and down. Some customers use this as their primary way to prioritize items, and they might have 100 items. In the case of one customer I talked to, I think they said it usually averaged around 100, which makes it really hard, right? You're dragging an item across like 100 items. That's not easy. And when you get a new item, it goes to the bottom. So if you want to prioritize that item, your only option was to just drag it 99 cards up in the list. And in the list view, you couldn't even see it. It was in different pages, which basically made it impossible. We had like a hard limit of 20. So some simple like early changes, kind of on a road to a broader experience there. Just adding in like a view count. So okay, you typically have 100. Now you can see your 100. And then in the boards, being able to move things using some actions. So again, you're not having to just drag things every single time, just get that sort of snappiness that would help them kind of move things, because it tended to be, I'm dragging something, I go back to the bottom, I'm dragging it, I go back to the bottom. Now you can do this kind of like click, 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 move things along. There's actually a community contributor is adding this move all. So this is moving issues to different projects. There are some limitations, I think, when we tried to do this and how we implemented it, but I think we were able to kind of make this work as an initial iteration. I think that's like a nice feature that customers have asked for as well. So being able to go into that bulk edit, move things across those teams. And then this one's probably the most exciting one, but we're at least starting to look at like real time and making some of these, like the boards in particular, more real time. Some of that refactoring work has started on the engineering side to enable some of those updates, so that when something changes, you can actually see it without refreshing the board. A lot of customers talk about wanting to use boards in synchronous meetings. Nobody wants to sit there in the meeting hitting refresh to see those changes. So stuff that's happened. You can find the first two in the product. This is still in a merge request, but should be coming pretty soon. And then one thing that we're looking at is this idea of saved views. And again, that's taking kind of this concept of a board and being able to scope some data and just use that in a more extensive manner. But it also means potentially combining different views and basically taking a perspective of the data as the primary and the kind of layout as the secondary, and putting those things together in a slightly different way. This would enable you to, let's say, filter the data and then switch between a list and a board and see the same data in both views, and share those and use those within your teams, and then maybe add some additional controls so that you can basically get to what you want to see, not what we think you want to see, but what you actually care about in a reusable way, and simplify things like editing and things like that to maybe make those even more powerful. So right now, this is really early stage. I'll just walk through a little bit of a prototype that I've put together to showcase just some early lo-fi thinking about this. This is still very much kind of something I'm working on. So expect there'll probably be something I click that doesn't work, but it at least kind of showcases this concept, right, of rather than being in a list storyboard, you're just kind of in this view space, and you control how you want to see it, and then you control kind of what you want to see, being able to add filters like you can today, and then be able to see kind of the data. Maybe I can like change something in line even, where in this case a status column, which we don't have now, but that's something else we're looking at, is making some of these more first class so that we can offer a little bit more ease of maintenance, status priority, and things like that are some of the most common uses for labels. And then just being able to maybe control a little bit about, like, let's say I want to see weight and I want to see it kind of prioritized. I could just turn it on, move the list order and then actually see that on here. But if I don't care about this, if I don't use weight, or this isn't personally interesting to me, I could just turn that off and then I wouldn't necessarily see it. And then as I switch to like a board view, again, I'm just changing sort of the layout of the data while maintaining like my filters and things like that, to make it a little bit easier to traverse. And then again, being able to just save this. Like, let's say this is what I always filter by, this is what I always see. I could create a board today, but I can actually save this as a view and then use it in both the list view and the board view. And it would save these filters down. I could add filters to this as a one-off. It would also save any of my kind of settings here, anything I turn on or off, so that I can kind of just come back to this at any point and find it. That's the long and short of it. I think there's more if you want to check it out in the issue itself, but that's kind of the idea. I think just how do we consolidate some of these like collections into a single sort of point of action and then make it easier to interact with and solve some of these customer problems. Like I said, very early stage work, still needs to go out to customers to actually make sure we're solving their problems in a usable way, but trying to respond to some of the known problems that we encounter.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I know I talked really fast, so if there's anything else I should go back to, let me know. But nope, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think Justin has a read only, but Christy has the first sync question.
I think Austin unread only'd his. So Austin, you want to start?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Nick, I'm excited to see you doing some of this lo-fi work around the list and board view toggles, especially from a navigation perspective. We've actually are incorporating a very similar idea into our current research proposals that we're running right now. There are a lot of elements that are in our submenus that don't necessarily need to be submenu items. I'm gonna call it locked files as an example. Things that are like changing the view of the data that's already in front of you don't necessarily make sense as a navigational item. So we're trying to learn where we can lean into areas that we can maybe take out some of those things to reduce the overall impact on the cognitive load for people sifting through those nav items. So this just makes me excited.
Awesome. Yeah, I've even heard that from customers of like, why are these in so many different places? Like, yeah, the more we can put the pieces together, that sounds great.
Cool. Now I'm up. So I'm really excited to see us focus on improving the experience of filtering issues because it needs it. So thank you, Nick, for digging in on that. I liked the things that I saw. And then there are also some fundamental problems we know we have with filtering. So for example, performance on filtering is really poor. You want to add a label to a filter, you go in, you start to type. The performance is so poor that I'm not sure how much of it is performance and how much of it is bugs, right? So you think about like you start to type and then like you type too fast and then it doesn't filter at all, or like and then you back up and then maybe you like start to retype and like maybe things start to display then and you're getting spinners the whole time. Another one that drives me nuts is not being able to add multiple words into a filter. So you hit space and then it jets you off to the next thing. Are you also, and when I say you, I mean the team, looking at those types of interactions as part of this?
I definitely think we do, and I think we've started ideating on some of that, and it's not quite as far along. I think that's kind of why like right now you see this is more or less status quo, although this is an OR filter. I snuck that in there just because I would love to have the OR filter. But yeah, I think so, and that I think is something we hear from customers as well, of like filtering is important. Some of them are coming from an environment where maybe they're using like a query language like JQL or something like that, and we're kind of in the middle where it's like you can kind of do that, but it's like loading stuff while you're doing that, and so I think trying to find ways to both simplify and support advanced users, I think is definitely something we'd want to look at.
Yeah, I'd love, because what you're doing now, which is great, is you're thinking about this more end state vision. That's wonderful. And then I would assume the next step, as you get further down the path on that, is to think about how we're going to break that up into iterations over time. I'd like for us to maybe consider whether or not just fixing what's there today, some of those fundamental, really bad, buggy, ugly things would be a really good first iteration before we start adding more new features, right? Which is what we just talked about with David, is fix the usability of what's there before we start adding new things in. So bringing that up now for your consideration.
And Chris, real quick, just a note on performance. Performance is design, and that's definitely something that we're focusing hard on in filtering, but also in other larger experiences as well. It's definitely a focus right now of actually going back and looking at the calls and how they're made, synchronous or asynchronous. So we saw a lot of demos this morning in the plan bi-weekly meeting, fortnightly meeting. And just the snappiness of all the calls that were being made, seeing things in real time for the first time in an issue is super exciting to see. So it's definitely a priority right now.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see real-time updates finally get attention. That's awesome to hear.
Just a small thing to note. The filter search is at least a 3-question situation. Is the page even using the component? The component itself has its own limitations, which you've already highlighted a few of them, Christy. And the third is then what is the data that the page is trying to load? And it all depends on where you are in GitLab. There could be a different answer to all 3 of those. So that's what creates that really weird inconsistency and poor performance overall, is all those things, if not more than that.
Yeah, if you are working on improving the current filtered search, definitely reach out to Foundations, because we have done some digging into the technical side of things and why it is the way it is right now. So there's definitely people on Foundations who can help provide more insight into that.
Will do.
So I suppose I could go. I love your use of wireframes plus hand sketching. I think it's awesome as you're exploring your design direction. Super easy way to explore without feeling like it's a heavy lift to make a change, because it's so cheap to work in wires. I was wondering what library you used and what tool you used to incorporate the hand sketch elements.
I would love to say that I had a library. I tried one and it didn't have a lot of components I needed. So this is kind of just a mix of just hastily made components and then just like the pencil tool to kind of put things together. Plus a little bit, icons are just from our icon set. So if I had an icon, I'd just throw those in, and then other stuff, just draw something to try to get the point across. So it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, but kind of intentionally. Hopefully it looks appropriately lo-fi.
Yeah, I think it's a great use of a mix of tools and spaces, very cool.
Completely agree. I have the next question. So I'm going to ask it broadly, but I'm not actually looking for you to go into details here. This is more of a like, hey, where's your head at? On the taxonomy of work items. So one, that's different from our existing taxonomy, how we talk about planning. And then also, I don't know that work items as a term is something that, whether or not that's something that users will understand, it's kind of a non-standard term. So what I'm really asking is, when we're thinking about the taxonomy of work items, as we're moving into breaking things out into a better hierarchy, how are we thinking about validating the taxonomy that we're going to use? Do you have research planned around that?
We do have some research that's kicking off soon around, it's a little bit higher level around like the different types of work items, although I think the terminology work items is included to some degree in there. I do think yeah, this would be something, we would really have to look at the kind of IA. This is used in some like similar products, but we would have to kind of make sure that that actually is usable both by the project managers and like all of the other users that are going to interact with this. So I don't know that there's a specific plan right now, just because we're not really even sure what the direction we want to test is. But I think once we align on that, that would be the next step.
Great. Yeah, I would love to see y'all make sure to include that in the research, because if the research comes back and says like, yeah, everybody totally understands exactly what this means, then that's wonderful. But I certainly want us to validate it.
Awesome. Unless anybody has some last minute comments, I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. So I'm going to give you all just a few seconds to see if anybody wants to chime in. I'm going to do the Christie stare. Apparently nobody has anything anymore to add, so I'm going to stop the recording.